Welcome to the Movement Minutes with your host, Reid Nelles. Here, we pursue the human connection. We learn how to empower one another. We discuss clinical pearls. We discover our passions. We reflect on our capacity to achieve. We remain open to novel trends and concepts because regardless of our backgrounds or experiences, our successes or failures, we all speak the same language, human movement. All right, on today's episode on the podcast, we've got Mike Stella, an athletic trainer based out of New York. He cut his teeth working for the Florida Gators and really running the mill through what he calls the wet dream of athletic training, being able to see people without any budget, without any constraints, but how he got beat up on that, which led him to his discovery and his passion of building the Movement Underground, his business, yes, business as an athletic trainer, where he pushes the norms of what athletic training can be and what it should look like. We talk about that in today's episode, how he challenges the NATA and how he inspires others, not only his clients and patients, but students and other healthcare providers as a profession to be better versions of themselves. So join me in welcoming Mike Stella. All right, guys, so we've got Mike Stella here. He's an athletic trainer based out of New York, as you just heard in the intro, and I want to thank him for joining me on today's podcast. I'm been looking forward to this as soon as he said, yeah, man, I'm in. Totally, brother. I was like, frick yeah, this is why I like Mike. So, but we just heard the intro. Mike, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us what we need to know.
Reid, my man, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to sit down and see you and chat. And, you know, usually we get to do this a few times a year and not in 2020 though. More about me. I mean, I guess the intro probably says it all, right? Athletic trainer, strength coach. I'm kind of breaking the mold a little bit as far as athletic trainers go, but I've always been a bit of a status quo rebel. And I feel like that's going to be a nice little theme for today, where, you know, I kind of go against the grain a little bit, but that's worked out for me so far. So we'll see how it continues to go.
Yeah, clearly it's not necessarily a fake it till you make it situation. You're just making it and making the world your oyster, I guess, right?
I appreciate that. I'm doing my best.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted you on here is to have this conversation of how challenging the status quo and fighting the norms and thinking outside the box isn't for everybody. Don't get me wrong. It's not like there's no recipe to what you've done with your career and your life and your personality and everything. I mean, there's no script to follow with that, but just pursuing your passions and making whatever you want happen because of work ethic and determination with that. So that's one of the things I appreciate about you. So
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. Really, coming from a colleague, an esteemed colleague, that always means a lot. Truthfully, it was never really kind of my intention. I guess I started down this path almost for selfish reasons, honestly, out of frustration and out of like a point of like insecurity, really. I kind of got to a point in my career where like I felt like my back was totally against the wall, and really it was, hey, I'll go for it now, because if I fail, I'm in the same spot.
Yeah, tell us about that. I was going to ask you about this whole situation. So you started your career as an athletic trainer down in Florida, and as a graduate student, and what do you call grad worker?
We call it a grad assistant.
Grad assistant, that's the word I'm thinking.
Graduate assistant, which is not totally uncommon for different science fields. But so yeah, I got my undergrad degree in athletic training and sports medicine from Marist, which is a small D1 up in New York. I played lacrosse there, and it was the last D1 to give me any money to play lacrosse.
You were average at lacrosse, right? I was mediocre.
Yeah, I was all right. Yeah. I was okay.
Just a D1 athlete, stud.
But yeah, that's kind of how I got into the whole athletic training thing, because honestly, I had blown my knee out my senior year of high school, and Marist was the last school to give me an offer, and they happen to have an athletic training program. So I guess it kind of worked out in that way. And so I switched my major, and because I really was very frustrated with my own rehab and progress. You know, I did everything everybody told me to do and then some, and I just was never the same guy. I never got my confidence back. It was just like a series of like obviously physical trauma, but then also the mental and emotional trauma that kind of goes with that, especially when you start questioning your own identity and like your value as a human being, because it was all predicated on that being an athlete part for my whole life. So I graduated, and I ended up getting a job at the University of Florida for the Gators, which was really cool. So I was in that 08-09 year where the Gators won a national championship in football and basketball. So I got to be a part of like what I call sports medicine in a bubble, you know, when you don't really have to worry about budget or time or resource, because it's all of those things are pretty much unlimited. And so you really get to just kind of do your thing, right? In your sports medicine, the rehab, try new things, be on the cutting edge of what's normal slash, maybe fringe. Because at that point, the mindset is whatever you can do to give your athlete a 1% benefit is what you do. Right. And so it really was a
Which
cool
isn't that
experience.
isn't any different from how you work right now, which I love. I
No,
mean, you're
no.
doing like if you guys haven't done yourself a favor, go follow Mike on Instagram. Like he's doing red light therapy and combining therapies, which we're going to get into with a completely different segue here.
Right.
But continue on the story. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, I'll kind of wrap that up. And so I spent some time at UF, and it was a great experience. I worked with Olympic level athletes, right straight out of the gates. So like top athletes, really great staff. Got to learn a lot. And then I took a position at George Washington University as a grad assistant. So the grad assistant thing, for people don't know, is athletic training used to be great in the sense that when you got an undergrad ATC license, you could basically kind of like parlay that education into a graduate education for free in a lot of cases. So my deal at GW was I got full tuition remission, so I didn't have to pay any tuition for graduate school, and I got $1,500 a month stipend on top of that. So it was a pretty sweet deal. Again, so I was in school, but I was also working for the men's soccer and the baseball teams. So those were my like sport assignments, and so kind of the way that worked was I was with my team all day, then I'd go to class at night, and then rinse and repeat, and that's kind of how it went. So I got my master's in sports management. So I went a little bit of a different direction there, because already at that point in my career, I was concerned about the ability to make a good livelihood as an athletic trainer. Typically salaries are really low. The work-life balance isn't really there, so after grad school, I took a D1 job at LIU Brooklyn back in New York. And I was working 80 hours a week for like 29 grand a year. So by the time I paid my student loans and my rent, I was broke for the month. You know what I
You
mean?
were
So
broke before that. I mean, like
yeah, totally.
you tell me, any single listener, viewer, anybody watching this, anybody even considering that, like nobody's going to sign up for that. I mean,
No,
had any student entering this realm known of that, which is kind of where I want to go with this conversation. Like you meet anybody on the street and you're like, hey, do you want to work 80 hours a week and make 29 grand? No,
with a
like
master's degree,
with a master's degree and so
right?
much student
Student
debt
debt,
and
yeah,
living in New York. So like cost of living ain't cheap, right? Yeah,
right.
no, nobody's going to sign up for that. No
And
benefits.
that's yeah,
Like,
yeah. That's kind of the issue with, I think, the profession of athletic training as it stands now is that it's kind of not changed much in the last 50 or 60 years. And what has changed recently is the powers that be have made it a master's degree minimum now, right? So like similar in the way that physical therapy went from a master's to a doctorate, I think athletic training was like, okay, we got to do the same thing. And so we'll make it a master's degree minimum. But what I think is what that does is actually takes away that ability for, an athletic trainer to potentially get an advanced degree for free or on the cheap. And so now you have more student debt, and I don't think it necessarily changes like the whole, salary uh, issue. And just, again, it's a cool job. Don't get me wrong. I love being an athletic trainer. Like what other profession gets to see, the whole injury spectrum from on the field, potential surgical intervention, immediate acute rehab, long-term rehabilitation, reconditioning, back to strength and conditioning and sport. You know what I mean? So we get to have that amazing experience, which I can't tell you how valuable that is now clinically, because people want to get better and they want to get to point B. But if you don't know what point B is, or you haven't taken people there before, it's hard to do that. Especially like the way rehab is on the insurance model. And I know you're familiar with that as well, which is, insurance doesn't care if you can't go back to doing the things you love. They care if you can take care of yourself on a
yeah,
base level, right? And so that's kind of, I think, even like in healthcare in general, is this kind of undertone of like neglect and like really not getting people better, which is why things like the movement underground, like on a cash based level, can even exist. How you can operate on a cash, because you're able to offer people a higher quality service, and actually take them to the place they want to go.
And
and
it's
people will pay for that.
absolutely. And yeah, I love that you touched on that. It's not a higher quality service in the sense that like, oh, I'm the best provider in my immediate area. Like, come see me because I am the bomb, which, you know, we're kind of
Yo,
the
it's
bomb,
just
right? I
no,
mean,
no,
but
no, no,
no,
that's bullshit.
but no, it's honestly a higher quality service because we're able to do whatever the hell we need to do to get that person feeling better. And I think you
Right.
have had this on a numerous occasion, probably weekly or daily, even. Like, there's so many times where a client will come in to see you and they're like, "Hey, Mike, I'm just not feeling it today. Like, something's just off." And you're like, "All right, man, let's just sit down and have a 10, 15-minute conversation." And guess what?
Totally.
You get paid for that 10, 15-minute conversation, and they feel better and are more educated and more empowered because of that conversation. It has a huge role in their therapy or in their care or treatment or whatever you want to
Right.
call it, right? So let's go down that realm. You now, like you said, own and operate Minnesota Movement. You do not own, operate my company, but very
No.
closely named Movement Underground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you guys can see behind, if you're viewing this, the video version, the what is that? The handshake of not
The
Vikings,
the Roman handshake.
Roman handshake. Yeah,
Right.
Viking handshake, Roman handshake, basically the same
Similar, I
people,
think. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the Roman handshake symbolizing unity and togetherness of that care. So I love that concept, and I love the idea that you brought in with something such as simple as like a little logo, right?
Right.
My logo does nothing for me in those realms, but I want to hear you talk about the role of combined tactics or combined modalities when treating athletes. How can we layer, or as you say, stack one modality or one intervention strategy on top of one another, and when how do you find the right tool for the job? Maybe go upon like your assessment and screening protocols, or I hate the word protocol, so
Right.
strategies, right? So which elicits the right tool or tactic for that job.
Yeah, so I think that's a cool question because I think this gets a little misconstrued. Like especially on social media, I think people tend to like throw a bunch of modalities on the same client, take us 15-minute stories, and they go, "Oh my god, look at what I'm doing! All this stuff at the same time." I don't always think that that's the right thing to do. In fact, I rarely think that that's the right thing to do. However, which is funny that I've become kind of known for like this whole idea of like stacking therapies. I think as far as acute care goes, when there isn't a whole lot maybe we can do from like a loading perspective or a movement perspective, where we might be more limited, either like immediate post-op or immediate acute trauma, that becomes a little bit more of something that is useful. The way that I look at it is based on physiology. Right, what am I trying to accomplish? So like for example, like this week I posted some stuff on my Instagram of me layering some neuromuscular electrical stimulation and some red light therapy. And the reason that I think that those two things go great together was, in that case, I had a quad strain that was pretty acute. It was only like 2 days out, a day or two out. And, a lot of pain, local swelling, very difficult to move or to even elicit a contraction there. And so my immediate goal is improve the lymphatic drainage process by allowing some, and also like keeping that musculature kind of active in some way, right? Keeping it responsive to stimulus. And that's where I think, and I'm not a big stim guy. That's the pretty much the only reason I use it is in that scenario. And I think it works really well to do two things: pump that swelling out and create this neurological, or at least maintain that neurological bridge. And then the second part of that, the red light therapy, is like, you're already laying there for 20 minutes. What else can I do to provide you some value on that 20 minutes? And I really love the red light because it's really stackable with almost anything, including manual therapy. I could throw the red light on you and have you have 20 minutes of that, photobiomodulation, which is a fancy 18 syllable word for the way that your body absorbs light from the sun. Right, same concept, only we're just using very specific frequencies of light that have been shown to improve pain, buffer the inflammatory process, add to cellular health, mitochondrial energy, ATP production, all of these things that your body needs to do anyway. So as far as like the way that I go about that, like, hey, why am I going to layer these things together? Because I'm checking off multiple boxes as far as what your needs are in that particular moment. And I'm able to double dip that time for you to make it really efficient, give you a high ROI is really what my goal is, a high return on that time investment. But when it comes to like, assessments, I mean, again, I keep it pretty simple. Like I think a lot of my assessments are just listening to people, letting them kind of tell their story and what they think is the problem, and then which again I've adapted a lot of that from some of our other rock tape colleagues that I've learned a lot from over the years, and so even that's changed a bit. But then basic movement assessments and keeping it simple, hands-on work, pain modulation, just improving capacity for movement, and then pairing that with integrated custom programming, strength and conditioning programming with your rehab, quote unquote, just like mixed right in.
I love the quotes around rehab because like I'm designing a course myself
Yeah.
right now, and thank you for the inspiration for that. And like there's a corrective exercise chapter, and like as I'm writing this, I'm like, what the hell does that implies that something was not correct? Like,
Right.
is there a better name for that? Movement intervention, patterning? Like, we've got to
Right.
find a better name for that across the industry.
You know what? It's like I used to feel that way too, except for I feel like as clinicians, like as soon as we learn something new and that discredits or like, refutes maybe something that we used to do, we go, we got to change the name. And then people have a really hard time finding us. And so the term corrective exercise, I think, is still valuable from a client or patient perspective in a way to find somebody that's going to actually look at movement as medicine, that somebody's going to look at movement. Again, I know there's people out there say, I'm a corrective exercise specialist, and really don't know what that means. But to me, any exercise can be corrective. It depends on why, when, how, and the reason you're programming it. I think that's the art of coaching, which is takes time, but there is obviously science behind that you can learn. You know what I mean? So, there's this huge, like, I don't know, argument, I guess, in the healthcare space of, is general strength what we need, or is it specific exercise? And I think that really depends on the population that you're looking at, because if you're working with a 65-year-old geriatric deconditioned person, yeah, a little bit of general strength is going to go a long way for that person. You know what I mean? But you're talking about a Division I college baseball player. There needs to be a layer of specificity there, because you can't just do 3 sets of 10 yellow TheraBand and they're not going to respond to that, So you kind
Absolutely.
of have to kick those protocols to the side and say, how can I create an adaptation, or how can I put this person in an environment for positive change?
And
That's
specifically
corrective exercise.
tailored
Right.
to them, right?
Right.
I
Exactly.
100% agree. And no, I love the point that you just made there of, from a clientele or patient perspective, the nomenclature of corrective exercise has a huge benefit for
Absolutely.
that.
From a
Makes sense.
marketing perspective. Yeah.
Exactly, right? But if we're speaking clinically, like I don't enjoy talking to other clinicians and saying like, "Hey, every single person who walks through your door sucks." Like, no, they don't, right? Like
Right.
they're just where they're at right now, and we can make them
Right.
better. So that's kind of my argument on that.
No,
Um,
100%.
what I want to touch on something that you said, and bring this up. You said the research, like you were talking about red light therapy, and I don't know if anybody who's listening or watching has experienced or utilized red light therapy either on themselves for an injury you may have, or clinically as a provider or practitioner. Um, but you just rattled off like 7 things that red light therapy can provide. And what I love most about people like you, and you specifically, who utilize these weird things or not normal things, is you understand and acknowledge the research behind it. How does that translate into clientele care? I mean, do you tell your patients and clients, or better put, do you explain to them what this is doing while they have it, whether it's red light therapy or ISTM or tape or anything like that? I mean, how much is education a part of your care?
Always. Education's a huge part. And I don't, it depends on the client, because I have clients too that are super into like the science part of it. They want to know the fancy words.
I love those
they want to,
clients.
and again, we all do, right? Because those are really fun. But
Yeah.
for a lot of my athletes, I keep it pretty simple. My explanations, I give them the scientific reasons, that just kind of like the way you would explain it to like a kid. And again, not that they can't handle more than that, but there's a certain threshold point that people kind of get paralysis by analysis, or it's just like, okay, Mike, I don't care. I just want to feel better. But I think it's extremely important for people to know why they're doing anything, because that is what's going to get them to buy into the process.
I was just gonna say,
You know what
not belaboring the point, but as long as
I mean? Right.
they're bought in enough to trust what you're doing is the right answer for them. And then after that,
Exactly.
stop, right? Like
Right.
once they
Right.
understand, they're like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I'm on this team. Let's go. You're done. Like go
Right.
then, right?
Exactly. And then some people that want more and they'll ask for more and then I'll give them more. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'll share you the research study. I've gone done the research. You know what I mean?
right.
There's plenty of resources out there. It's a matter of just, again, I think that's part of the soft skills, soft skills being like, your emotional intelligence or your ability to connect with people and just kind of read people, I think is an art that's built into this rehab profession that I think is understated a lot. And so even like, for how I even look to hire people here. Like I would rather take a good person that just has that innate ability to converse and connect with people and teach them the technical stuff than the other way around.
Absolutely. I mean, the
You know what I mean? I think that
technical stuff
person's
is
more
out there.
scalable.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
100%.
Right.
Um, no, that soft skills aspect, I think you have a very similar personality to me. I do not have the best bedside manner. I'm not going to coddle you unless it's necessary. I'm kind of like, if you ever watched like Remember the Titans, like
Yeah, a
Coach.
little bit of tough love
Yeah,
sometimes.
like
100%, man.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
coddle you. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
If I need to give my patients a hug, like COVID alone, right? I'll give them a damn
Right.
hug. But
Right.
I'm also going to push you. Like I'm a very
Right.
brash individual. And there's been times where like I work very similar to you. I have a lot of athletes, but I also see a general population, which I'm sure you do too every now and then. And I had a gosh, she must be like 80, 82-year old post-op hip patient. And she just wasn't getting the buy-in, wasn't getting the education that I was trying to deliver to make the understanding of movement patterns and the corrective exercises that I was giving her important or a priority for her. And so I brought up the research article that basically said your risk of death if you're 70 years or older after a fall and a fractured hip, which is exactly what happened to her, is really, really good. I mean, there's a good chance you're going to die in the next month. If I remember the research correctly, I think it's like 80 to 90% risk of death within 1 month after that. And she just started sobbing. And not that I needed like a fear based tactic to create buy in, but she's like, this makes a lot of sense. I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
like,
right. It's
and
not it's more important than just you going home and having to do these exercises and it's like, oh, it's taking time out of your day. It's like it's
right,
potentially saving your life. You know what I
exactly.
mean? And so like that, listen, but that's the skill part is understanding or being able to interpret from somebody and how they interact with you what the carrot is that you have to play
Yeah,
in order to get them to buy in. And sometimes that's exactly it. Like I get young, especially like for me, I'll get like that 12 to 14, 15-year-old age group, this generation of kids, unfortunately, I think has become softer and softer and softer. They're like chewed bubble gum at this point.
softer than
Um,
baby shit.
you know what I mean? Everything is so comfortable for them. They get instant gratification on anything that they want to do or know. And my favorite part about also kind of integrating the strength and conditioning part is that the bar weighs 45 pounds no matter who you are. Doesn't matter how much money your parents have or what kind of phone you have or what car you drove it in on. It's like that's 45 pounds regardless. And it can either expose you or shape you into a better human. And so, like a lot of these kids just don't understand the fact that like they all got D1 MLB aspirations, but they also have a club team beer league softball work ethic.
Yeah,
That's not going to mix. That's not going to
no,
get you there. And so, in those cases, tough love is sometimes what I have to do. And it's really funny how, you know, I'm very honest and transparent, and that's why moms like me. But I'm also not a pushover or somebody who's going to like placate a situation, which is why dads like me. And so, like, I'm not afraid to give a young athlete tough love and tell them how it is, because I was there. I was a guy that had talent untrained in high school and could run a 4.640 and was getting all these scholarship offers that I didn't even have to go look for until my knee blew out, until I was damaged goods.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, those bad habits of not putting in that work exposed me at the division 1 level. You know what I mean? I had to learn quickly and adapt to that. And so I try to use that life experience and pass it on and just kind of, again, give them examples because, like, hey, listen, kid, I understand that these are your goals, but your actions are not lining up. So something's going to either have to give, your goals or your actions. You choose. Both are hard.
Right.
Choose your hard, right?
Exactly. And I mean, the only way is through kind of concept there. What I like
Yeah.
that you said is, you're not bashing them over the head with it. Like you're instilling empowerment with them. I mean, you're trying to be a part of their team and on their team and motivate them towards your common goal with them. I mean, they want
Yeah,
to
I'm
be
just trying to,
they want to be the best
exactly.
athlete possible. They want to get that MLB aspiration met, right? And
Right.
you're just kind of highlighting their weaknesses. And
Well,
there's
I'm just asking them to meet me in the middle.
right.
Don't
And
ask me to get you a result if you're not willing to get that result. So
absolutely.
if you want me to help you, it's more than just a transaction of money.
Right.
Like you have to, and I fired clients for that, and I do that. Like I just won't work with people who aren't motivated, and it's not because I'm not. It's not because I'm mean or I don't want to help them. I want to help everybody that I see, of course. But for me, it's just I'd rather spend my time and energy on somebody. Money being the same, I'd rather spend my time and energy on somebody who wants it.
Exactly.
You know what I
I
mean?
think
Because yeah,
I heard this along the lines, and I think you'd agree with it. When I heard somebody say to their clients, I'm never going to work harder than you do, meaning you need to work this much more than I do to achieve these goals. I can't force you to do
right,
these. I mean, I can't, all I can do is instill
yeah.
inspiration into you. I can't force you to do anything.
I can teach you, but I
Yep.
can't do the reps for you.
Love
You know
it.
what I mean? And like I've even said that to kids too. It's like, hey, listen, man, if I could do it for you and give you the result, I would do it, but that's impossible.
But then you'd
And
be
so
superhuman and even better looking, Mike.
listen, you know, can't be pro at everything, I
Yeah.
guess.
Let's continue down this realm of helping people. You are currently, and we kind of touched on this previously, of the norms of the athletic training community and the career options that ones have. You've been a huge help for young grads, students interested in the ATC profession, as well as advocating in a big part for your community of athletic trainers. I don't want to say against the NETA, but hitting heads
Little status quo.
a little
Yeah,
hitting
yeah,
heads a little bit lately.
yeah.
Uh,
I'm rattling my cage a little bit, is what I
yeah,
say.
which is necessary, right? Like
Yeah,
ruffle some feathers, stir the pot a little bit. I mean,
right,
the conversation
right.
isn't going to change unless you do that. So tell us more about that.
I mean, it's really funny. Again, like I jumped out on my own and decided to start my own business. And at the time, there really was no resource for me as an athletic trainer. Like I had called my state boards 3 different times, spoke to 3 different people, got 3 different answers as to the legal status. I had one person who was at the New York State Licensing Board say, you can't have your own business because you can't hire your boss, right? Because athletic trainers have to work, quote unquote, under the supervision of a physician, which is a joke because in all my years as a collegiate athletic trainer, I have never once practiced with a physician standing there. Right? It's really more of a relationship. They're
Yeah.
like, hey, when your skill set and your scope of practice meets its end and you need advanced interventional care, this is the channel that you go through, which is what I have set up for my business. If I get to a point where, this doesn't sound right to me, I'm going to refer this to my orthopedic partner or my functional medicine partner or any of the other numbers of healthcare providers that I have in this network that I'm building. And that's really what my business is about, is help people here and now with the general ish stuff. Obviously I'm doing things that are pretty specific, integrating with the strength and conditioning, but like really being that person that can help point you in the right direction. And that's one of the best parts about athletic training. But I think what this language has done is put like a glass ceiling on the profession. And what's happening is, athletic training has become a stepping stone profession, meaning a lot of students will go to athletic training school for undergrad, and then they'll go and do chiro school or PT school or PA school or any other help. They jump ship and they never actually practice. So our matriculation rate for new athletic trainers is extremely low compared to the kids that actually go into programs. And I think that that's going to get worse now that it's a master's degree minimum, now that you have to commit to this idea that you're going to be overworked and underpaid. Again, I think athletic training is awesome. It's an attractive job. I mean, like, geez, as a 21-year-old ATC, I was on the sidelines of a Florida Gators national championship game with 110,000 people in the stands. You know what I mean?
Pretty damn cool.
Like, really cool.
Right.
Yes, I mean, working with high-end athletes at a high level with it's every clinician's kind of like wet dream, really, is to be able to do that. And we have that experience as a profession, but we just have no business acumen. We have no, I think the people at the top of the profession have kind of like, they made it. So they're like, let's just maintain the status quo. Let's just keep it where it's at. Because, and so like, even this whole thing, like, athletic training community was hit really hard by COVID. And so, and the reason because was like a lot of these jobs that people are, that are generally low paying, that work for like colleges and high schools, they had this like false sense of security that the institutionalized sporting industry was protecting them. And as soon as sports got canceled, everybody got fired and furloughed, because athletic trainers don't generate revenue. We are a line item expense on a budget. Right. And so it's like, oh, no sports. We don't need these ATs. Let's just cut the sports medicine program. And it's like, you're cutting your healthcare providers during a global pandemic. Like, how does that make sense on any level?
As if you're pawns on a chessboard.
And then the worst part is, because athletic trainers, again, great people, it's a great community, but they get fired and furloughed. And then their athletic directors go, hey, can you help us with the return to sport plan? And they did it after they got fired and they weren't being paid. And like, that's the kind of stuff that is basically like shooting ourselves in the foot, And so the funny part about it was, I had never intended to be like an athletic training profession advocate. I started creating content because I knew it was important for my business. I knew it was important to get my message out there and what I was doing. And I started doing that for really selfish reasons. And when I got the rock tape job, I hadn't even taught a class yet. And Allison called me and she was like, hey, can you go do NATA? It was my first rock tape event. And I was like, absolutely, that's awesome. So I flew down to New Orleans, and it was the National Athletic Trainers Association meeting. I wasn't even at the time an NATA member. I had stopped paying my dues for the 6 years prior to that, because it was like my civil disobedience, because I didn't agree with the way that they were,
essentially just a giant middle finger to the NATA.
Yeah, it was my way of saying, you know what? I don't believe in what you guys, like the agenda that you have that's quote unquote pushing this profession forward, because it's not. It hasn't in the 15 years I've been an athletic trainer. And talk to anybody with 2 or 3 times the experience I have, and they'll tell you the same thing. So I didn't pay, and I went to NATA to work the booth. And all of a sudden, there's a line at the booth. And I'm like, Ethan, what's going on? Like, why are these people waiting there? And he was like, dude, they're waiting for you. I'm like, what? And at that time, like my YouTube had kind of blown up a little bit. The YouTube audience was definitely bigger, and I was just absolutely floored by the impact that it had. Like, like young clinicians coming up to me like I'm the reason they became an athletic trainer, or I'm the reason they stayed in, like they didn't leave the profession, or that they started a business because I did. And it just like, dude, like when I tell you, like there's those few moments in life where you're like actually moved, like by something you just weren't expecting.
Absolutely.
And I just, again, we see the numbers on your Instagram profile. And again, what does that mean? It means nothing, but we see the numbers of your subscribers on YouTube, and the society has like some value that they place on that. But
when you actually meet them in person and have that Paul McCartney moment, like,
right,
like
in that little niche community that I had made an impact, and it was a surreal kind of feeling. And honestly, I rejoined on the plane.
There you go.
Like I had on the plane home, I rejoined the NATA, not because I agree with what they're doing, but because I find myself in a position where I have a voice and the ability to speak for people who can't or don't. And that's kind of what I do. And I don't do it a lot, because I'm proud of the fact that my audience on social media is multidisciplinary, but I'm really proud of the fact that I've in some way changed, or at least am starting to help change the viewpoint of an entire profession. So yeah, I mean, it's a really cool thing. And so it's, it's with great power comes great responsibility.
I was going to say, it kind of comes back to like your sports background, right? Like you're doing something bigger than yourself for the profession that you're in now. When you were on a sports team, you do the exact same thing on the field or pitch or ice or whatever sport you're playing for your team. Your community is now not just ATCs, but the healthcare profession as a whole, and you're trying to do your part with the voice that you have to bring it up to a higher standard. And I don't think anybody would ever bash you for trying to bring something up to a bigger standard. I mean,
It's interesting. I don't get a lot of hate. I really don't.
yeah,
But I have had some backlash for that. Like
absolutely.
people, a lot of times it's when it's other providers, like other healthcare professionals, they worry about the whole idea that if athletic training scope of practice expands, that it's going to impact their ability, or it's going to impact their ability to make money or generate revenue, and which is completely ridiculous,
Absolutely.
because there's only about like 50,000 ATs in the country, I think, and so like even if you dropped us all in the same bucket, I don't really think we'd make a dent, in terms of like the amount of people who need help. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think there's more to be gained from integrating and having a multidisciplinary approach. And again, that's, like even for you, like I remember talking to you like a year ago, and you were like, "Hey, I'm looking at hiring this ATC. What do you think?" And I'm like, I think it's such a great skill set to add to a chiropractic practice. I think it's such a great overlapping skill set that has a little bit different, maybe some things that can bring some value to what you're doing. And that's one of the things I love about the Rock Tape family. We don't look at the credential. We look at the human. We look at like the work that you're doing. And
If
that's
they were
part of my
looking
favorite.
at credentials, I wouldn't have gotten hired. Let's put it that way.
Probably me neither, man. Probably me neither. So it's just really cool. And like, that's what I'm trying to bring to the movement underground. Multidisciplinary, multiple viewpoints. As long as you share a similar philosophy, you have a place here.
Absolutely.
And there's, work within the philosophy, but have your own autonomy is kind of my goal
For sure.
from like a clinical perspective.
Right. And you just said something that I love. Job security is not something that you or I should be worried about, or any clinician, especially in our niche and demographic of clinicians should be worried about. People are always getting hurt because they're pushing themselves to the next level. And not that
Right.
we should like say, yes, somebody got hurt, they're going to come to my acute care clinic or whatever it might be. But that's just what happens, right? And if we
Right.
think about, like, I don't know the ATC numbers, but chiropractic, the national average is anywhere between 8 to 12% of the entire population has ever seen a chiropractor. I shouldn't be seeing the person at the strip mall down the street as competition, more so collaboration. How can
Right.
we increase the marketing exposure to let people know these conservative measures or the movement tactics that they can take to be better? Because at the end of the
Or even
day,
just, yeah, exactly. Or
you
even
and
just anything that's not drugs or surgery. You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like,
I mean, like, yeah, conservative measures does not mean like voodoo doll stuff, right? Like, it's
right.
being your own advocate and finding somebody who agrees with that advocacy to push you to be that better human being and better mover. So, um,
100%.
I love it, man. I love it. So you also said something. You never meant to be this social media. I don't want to say mogul.
I'm definitely not that.
Dar. You're famous, Mike. And no,
I'm an influencer.
let me
Oh God,
backtrack that.
no.
By the way, I've actually had, gosh, off the top of my head, probably 2 people come in to see me and show me your videos from YouTube. They're like, "Hey, man, I saw this. Like, do you do stuff like that?" I'm like, A, I know that guy. This is
Right.
hilarious. B, yes, I do. Come on in. So you've influenced more than just the ATC community with that. So thank you for the referrals. I should
No,
give you
I
like a
mean, again,
finder's fee if that was legal, right?
no, but that's the coolest part about the whole social media thing. And again, I know people, oh my God, it's not real life. No, it's not real life.
No,
I'm showing you what I want to show you. However, um, it's opened doors, not just for me. And that's the coolest part,
right.
because now, another AT, and again, I'm speaking to ATs because that's, like obviously the credential that I am, but like other ATs who've started businesses now, when they have a new client walks in seeing my video, it's not a completely foreign thing to them that an athletic trainer can help them. That is what the NATA and the BOC, like our governing bodies, have
Yep.
been trying to do for over half a century. And
And
in 5 years on fucking YouTube,
yeah,
I've been able to do that. And sorry, I didn't mean to drop an F-bomb, but
that's all good.
like, and so I was interviewed by a student like recently, and I made this statement and I posted it on Instagram, and it went not viral, but like at least in the athletic training
Yeah.
community, it got pretty hot. But I said, like, I feel like I've done more personally for the athletic training profession than the BOC has ever done.
And what
And that's what I mean is the reach of the education, the reach of the exposure to the general population or people who are seeking this type of care.
Right. And so for those of you listening, viewing, watching this, whatever, know that Mike isn't trying to say like, I did more in 5 years because I'm the fucking bomb. Two
Right.
F-bombs. I'm surprised it took us this long to swear, by the way. We get heated in this moment.
It's a sign of genius,
Right.
I've been told.
Yeah, something like that. It's not that you're trying to say like, I'm better. It's you're trying to illustrate how much they've been lacking in trying to gain this exposure.
Right.
It's not that you
Yeah,
went
exactly.
above and beyond and this is your sole
I
purpose
haven't.
in life.
I haven't.
You just
that's
said
the
what you
truth.
wanted to say.
I just put my stuff out there.
Right.
I had no intentions of being like an athletic training, advocate or, person who's on the front lines of the profession. I had no intentions of that. I was simply trying to run my business, and I knew social media was a big part of that,
Absolutely.
or was going to be a big part of that. The point, exactly to your point, the point that I was exactly trying to make is just that the NATA has not changed its approach. Like the same things that the same mission points that they were on 25, 35, 45 years ago are still the same battles that we're fighting today. And so at a certain point, you have to reevaluate the approach. If you're not getting the result that you're looking for, you have to look at how can we change or shift this message so that it's actually being received. We're still fighting the battle of like, call me an athletic trainer and not a trainer. It's like you said, only 12% of people have been to a chiropractor. Like we're screaming into the ocean.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like, that is not going to work. You have to show people that you can provide them value, not just tell them what your value is based on the schooling you have. We all have schooling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Schooling doesn't mean anything necessarily. It's your ability to apply it anyway. So showing people that an AT has these skill sets. And how do we do that? Well, we all have that ability now.
Yeah.
Right. We all have
It's
the
right in your
ability
pocket.
to put out our message and to provide people some value. And I think, instead of embracing that, our governing body just uses social media as a way to like tell other athletic trainers how great, give us a pat on the back.
Yeah.
For Thanksgiving, we all got sent a haiku to remind us to renew our membership and pay our dues.
I bet you
Thanksgiving
that
haiku.
made you feel good about yourself, right?
It just, it is. It's just so funny. Right. Honestly, it's sad and amusing at the same time because they're just so out of touch and like they have no feel. Again, I understand they have to collect their dues so they can pay the lobbyists to do these things. I get it. I pay my dues. I do now. But you just are coming off of a year where more athletic trainers were fired and furloughed than any point in history. And truthfully, our profession is on the brink of destruction at this point.
And you sent us a haiku.
And you sent us a goddamn haiku.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know what I mean? What are you doing to get these people their jobs back or improve job security? Like that's the crazy part is I started my own business knowing that there was no guarantee that I would make it.
So
I took that risk. People who work for a big school and take a crappy salary took that job because there's a level of security there.
Safety.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you advocate for more ATCs doing what you do? I mean, like going out on their own 100%. Yeah.
Yes.
Like
yes.
obviously
I think
it's not a recipe for all, like we said way in the beginning of this conversation, but there's definitely and I've seen this in my searching for somebody to hire is there's people who want to do more and want to get out of that 80-hour week, $29,000 a year job. And I don't want to say they don't have the balls. They just don't have a direction to go with it. And I think that's a big issue.
Exactly the problem, Reid. You just hit the nail on the head. There's no direction beyond the traditional, beyond the status quo. And so the message that gets propagated from the top down is, here's a pat on the back. We appreciate you. Stay in line, stay obedient, stay in the status quo because this is how it's always been. Right. And so therefore this is what we should just embrace.
Right.
And for me, as like a habitual status quo rebel and somebody who's on the other side of that now, somebody who I make my own schedule, and again, this, and this is the same for any healthcare provider. If you're a chiro PT thinking about jumping out on your own, it is not easy and it is not for everybody. You know what I mean? Even if you don't have to fight that battle of, professional autonomy / recognition across healthcare / recognition of the general public, which we're all fighting on some level. But even despite that, it's hard. You know what I mean? And so, but am so proud that to see more athletic trainers jumping out on their own. And now we're starting to see groups and clubs and think tanks, just like other professions. And to me, that is the coolest thing, or that's been the biggest change that I've seen in the profession from the jump. And so I think that is again, a part I'm really proud of, in some way inspiring that, again, even though it wasn't my initial intention, you know?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I like, you've said this a couple times now, and I wanted to go this way. This wasn't your intent. You just pursued your passion and pursued what you were interested in with technology and all your gadgets. And I'm a tech nerd too. And it got you into this position where you have a following, you have a voice. And I love that. So, what I want to switch gears on a little bit is, not only are you a badass advocate, provider, clinician, dude in general,
Oh, you're too kind.
but you're also a badass fisherman and now a surfer. You just
Yeah.
you just got back from Costa Rica, right?
Yes, I did.
Um, what are you falling more in love with now? I mean, fishing's always been like your go-to getaway zen place,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Is
100%.
surfing taking over that?
Yeah, kinda. I'll be honest. Like, my amount of days fishing has gone down tremendously over the last couple of years. You know, I grew up
Which,
fishing.
let me interrupt you, and
Yeah.
I hate
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this as a host of this. Mike doesn't just like go sit on a creek and fish. Like, he paddles out or foot paddles out a 12-foot kayak. How big
Yes,
is it?
13 feet.
13-foot
13 feet.
kayak into the fucking ocean, miles out into the ocean, all by himself in a 13-foot kayak, catching sea bass that are going to drag
Yeah.
him around for half a mile. It's
Yeah.
he's slightly insane, but continue.
It You know what it is? It's the law of escalation. It started when I was a kid. It was something that me and my brother used to do with my grandfather and my great uncle. So it's kind of like a multi-generational way that we spent time together and connected. And I always appreciated those memories. And like through high school and college, got away from fishing a little bit, and then kind of came back to it as an adult in my 20s, because at the time, was overworked, underpaid, really struggling, not only financially, but also like mentally and emotionally and socially, because also kind of all stemming from that same thing. And, fishing was just something I could do that got me out of that mode. And like, I felt better. I got those feelings of connection to happier days. And so I think that's part of why it appealed to me so much. I'm mostly catch and release fisherman. I don't keep an awful lot, but I do occasionally, because I also really appreciate that connection to the food part of it. Like, wow, this is a lot of freaking work to get
Yeah,
this one fish to eat. You know what I
right.
mean? And so it's like, makes you appreciate what you have. And again, anything that gets me outside, and gets me moving a little bit is something that I really like. But surfing has become kind of like my new like passion slash love. I think it's really hard, but that's part of the reason I love it. Is it's doesn't matter what level of surfer you are, whether you're just starting, you've never done it before, or like you're an elite person. There's always something new to learn. There's always some skill set that you're trying to either attain or progress in, and that is really appealing to me. And so part of it was also like I got into like this whole idea of like flow state, human flow states, and like surfers will talk about like getting in that flow a lot. And because of it's a similar skill set, but you never ride the same wave twice, right? So it takes all of your mental and neurological faculties to kind of put it all together in that moment. So it's a great way to just be present. So that's kind of given me a lot of value, even on a spiritual slash personal level. Um, and it's also a hell of a lot easier to just grab my board and walk down to the beach than it is to
Yeah,
like get all my fishing gear together. And like, that's a whole day thing, where surfing, I can sneak in before work, after work, like really easily. So it's more accessible to me.
yeah.
And so that's become a huge thing of it. And
Accessible surfing in New York. I never thought I'd hear those words, but
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I live in Long Beach, man, on Long Island, so like literally 4 blocks to the beach. And we do have pretty nice beaches here. I know people don't think about New York as having good
Yeah.
beaches, but we have some nice ones. And yeah, the last thing I'll say about that is like I was also looking for something that I could do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And not that I'm old by any means. I'm about to turn 35, but my dad died when he was 33. And so like, when I turned 33, it kind of like makes you it definitely shifts your perspective quite a bit about life and mortality. And I just wanted something that I could do and progress. And like, it's really cool. I go out surfing and see like 70-year-old dudes out
Yeah,
there with the
absolutely.
cap on, just
Yeah.
absolutely killing it. I'm like, you know what? If I make it that long, I want to be able to do that, like, or have something that keeps me like, I want to get out there. So that was part of it too. So yeah, Costa Rica was amazing. It was a 1 week immersive like surf school. It was like the Google of surf schools that I went to. So I got to work with a pro coach twice a day for 2 hours, video, video analysis, like just like everything that like kind of like I would do for somebody from a
Right.
movement perspective, but for surfing specific. And they just do it at such a high level. And it was like 3 seasons worth of experience in like a week.
Right. And that's
Yeah, it was just so cool.
one thing you mentioned there is like human nature loves learning. We as critters love experiencing new things. That's why novel stimuluses and treatment work, because they're
Right.
new to us and we're engaged, whether that's consciously or subconsciously, in that. And if
Or
we are
both. Yeah, exactly.
right, and if we're consciously interested in that and want to pursue a passion, hiring a coach and actually, it was almost like a treat yourself kind of trip for you, I would assume. Like,
100%.
it's
Yeah.
not cheap to go to Costa Rica and surf at this high level school for
Especially,
whatever,
right.
but especially
No,
during
definitely
COVID.
not. Right.
Um, but it was something that you're passionate about and you're willing to learn more and be coachable in that realm. And it takes a lot to say, like, hey, I know I don't have all the answers. I need to drop my swords and ask for help. And sometimes
Yeah.
asking for help is the necessary thing.
The cool part about it was too, is like, part of like one of the things I love to do is when I'm teaching for Octape on the road is like documenting my Instagram stories, like the travel part of it. Cause people love that. It's
Yeah.
really cool to see like, hey, this is what it takes for me to go to a city and then teach. So because I hadn't done that in like 9 months,
Yeah.
I started doing it just almost like secondhand nature. And then the owners of the resort saw it because I was tagging them. And so I guess they kind of got a gist of who I was and like looking through my profile, and I do movement stuff. And even my coach was like, I know you're really into biomechanics and this and that. And like, is there anything else that you want to go over? This is on like day one. I'm like, listen, don't worry, don't worry about what I do or what I know. Like, I'm here to learn from you. So I want your professional opinion on where you think I'm at. And so like, even like the second and third day, she's like, hey, my coach, she's like, hey, do you want to go, out back, which is like where the big waves are? Do you want to practice some of these skills in the whitewater, which is like basic stuff? And I'm like, what do you think I will get the best value? She's like, I want you to work on 1, 2, 3, XYZ in the whitewater first, and then we'll go out. I'm like, that's what we're going to do.
Perfect.
And again, you have to be able to put that ego part of it aside, which isn't easy. Of course, like I'm there, I'm fit, I'm better shape than most of the other people. Not that that makes me any better, but like
Right.
totally capable of going out to the big waves. But my coach said, I think this will benefit you the most. And so that's what you have to do. And it did. She was right, because this is what she does for a living,
Right. And I
Um,
think this translates well into like therapy and care. And as a strength and conditioning coach, I'm sure you would agree. Like, I like this idea of progressions and regressions. Like,
sure.
nobody likes regressing. Like, there's no buy-in win for the client or the therapist. Like, I don't like seeing people have to regress their strategies. But I phrase it in the sense of, I never played basketball, but a Kobe, right? Like, I'm going to take a step back so that I can hit this three to create space for opportunity away from the defender. If we're thinking
Right.
about care or coaching and learning capacity in general for humans, taking a step back is going to create opportunity for change. And
Absolutely.
that's not always necessary, but most often it's very, very necessary.
Listen, in the athlete community, like, again, I get to work with high level guys and girls that are really good at their sport at the collegiate level, the pro level. And you would be astounded by how much I do actually have to regress them. But that's where the education part comes in, because it's like, man, you're struggling with this low back pain when you're at the plate, but you can't separate your pelvis from your hip very well.
Right.
You can't extend your hip well. And I have to use a glute bridge to teach you how to do that on a basic level, because you can't do it. So, and the way that I always frame that to people is like, listen, you've succeeded in your sport despite this issue.
Right.
What's going to happen when we clean this up? And so you just have to give yourself the opportunity to, like you said, take that step back, clean this up, and then reattack it with this newfound skill set. You know what I mean? So even the joke on the surfing trip was like, we'd come back after a session and like, you know how like when you just like, even from a movement perspective or any kind of skill, it's like when you just get it that first time, it's like, oh, like I figured it out. And then you're able to reproduce it.
Yeah.
It's like that scene from the Matrix, you know, where like Neo wakes up after being plugged in. He's like, I know Kung Fu. You know, that's kind of what it feels
aha
like.
moment. Yeah.
Right. That aha moment. And so like,
Absolutely.
I think a great way to like boil down what I try to do on a day-to-day basis is give people that aha moment
100%.
in a session.
100%.
Like they figured it out with me in like kind of like a micro skill environment. And now they're able to go use that and apply it to all the other things that they do in their sport or their life. And those are the moments that we look for as clinicians. It's like, oh, see, you figured it out. You figured out how to segment your spine. You figured out how to extend your hip without extending your back. You figured out how to get over that big toe. Like these little things that are seemingly insignificant when you talk about, you know, a pro lacrosse player or a pro baseball player and like the high level skills that they have. A lot of times you definitely can have high level skill with low level function. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, great athletes are great compensators. And regardless if
Right.
you're working with that 13-year-old baseball player or a professional basketball player, whoever you're working with, just a common recreational weekend warrior, everybody will always benefit from that extra 1%. And if we're
Yes.
talking about these regressive strategies in life or care, finding that 1% is going to open so many windows of opportunities. And
I
it's
love
huge.
one of my favorites is small hinges swing big doors.
Big time.
And that's one of my favorite like one-liners that I deliver to athletes and clients is you know, like especially after the assessment where, you know, I tend to brain dump on people sometimes, and I know we all do because I get excited about it, you know, but I'm very specific about how I communicate. Like, hey, like all the things we found today in the assessment, these are not flaws. These are opportunities.
Yep.
These are the small hinges that we can make changes to that might swing that big door for you. And that's where I want your focus to be, on that small or that micro skill process. And you know, and again, and that's all buy-in strategy. It's layered, man. It's all into, and that's why I don't think giving somebody a template program and saying, okay, just do this, like even if people know nothing, I think they know enough kind of like innately that how is this going to work for me? It's been Xeroxed 100,000 times.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's boring and I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't understand why I'm doing it. I feel like crap and this hasn't made me feel any better. Of course, they're going to feel that kind of backhanded side of neglect that a lot of us feel when we go the conventional medicine route, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I do, however, want to hear about your course. You are developing no, you've already developed, recorded, and now it's on downloadable formats for purchase everywhere that you can buy courses or Mike's website.
Right, my website.
End of the ice age, talking about acute care, especially as it relates to athletes. Tell us a little bit more about this course.
So I guess this was kind of like a passion project of mine, or at least something that I always thought I did very well. So like again, a lot of it was coming from experience as an athlete, an injured athlete myself, and like when after my knee reconstruction, I really struggled with chronic swelling, chronic pain, lack of function. I just, again, like I said, I was never the same guy, and I did everything everybody told me to. And I spent an hour in the athletic training room after every practice, like burying my knee in ice and getting in the cold whirlpool, just doing crap that didn't feel good because I thought at the time that it was helping me prepare for the next day. And what I learned now, you know, fast forward however many years, 10 plus years later, is that all of those things that I was doing were probably hurting me more than they were helping me, based on human physiology and how our bodies actually go through the healing process. And so end of the ice age is, again, a challenge to the status quo of this 50 plus years of kind of the reductionist approach to acute care, and also kind of an answer / call to action for our healthcare system in general to start looking at this early stage with a little bit more emphasis than we currently do. You know, how often do you see that post-op client or patient come in and said, oh yeah, my surgeon told me I didn't need to start rehab until 4+ weeks after the fact. And that's common. That's like the standard operating procedure now. And, you know, in an athletic training setting, like at Florida, we'd have athletes have surgery and I would go to their dorm rooms that night to start the process of rehab that night.
Yeah.
And again, when you don't have to worry about time, money, all these things, it's just get your athletes better and get them out there on the field. that was the mindset. And so I've always had that mindset. And so End of the Ice Age is kind of, again, it's not an anti-ice course. It's just challenging the status quo of what we think acute care is.
And
And what we think
what else you
and
can
what
do.
else is out there.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's basically like being savagely good at the fundamentals of human physiology when it comes to the healing process, which is not simple at all. And so my goal was to simplify the physiology of that so it's understandable of like, hey, here's the physiology of the healing process. And because these are the micro processes, even going from our last conversation, here are the micro processes that are happening in this macro process. Understanding them, when they happen, how they happen, shows us the opportunities to enhance that process. And when we look at things like icing or immobilization or excessive use of compression, all of those things are fighting against our physiology. They're going against what our body is trying to do. And that's not my opinion. It's what the science has been showing us for quite some time. And then what's the other side of acute care is just pain management. Okay, well, take this opioid pain reliever, take this NSAID pain reliever. Since the early 2000s, the rate of accidental death due to opioids has tripled and now is the leading cause of death related to unintentional injury in America. Okay, is opioid overdose. It's become an epidemic that nobody's talking about. In fact, New York State has a task force related to opioid prescription fraud. They had to create a task force because it's so rampant in this state. What's the other side of that? Oh, just take an NSAID, just take anti-inflammatories, which is the standard procedure you would get if you went to an emergency or acute care clinic. Oh, I sprained my ankle. What do they give you? They give you a prescription for naproxen sodium, which is an NSAID pain reliever.
Right.
There is zero period of time using NSAIDs that is without risk.
Right.
Zero. And people are doing this for months at a time, not understanding that they're actually limiting their body's ability to get through that injury process. And so what End of the Ice Age is in a nutshell is the acknowledgement that, hey, we've been effing this up for a while. And here's the physiology of healing. Here is what we know about pain science in 2020. How can we integrate our understanding of these processes and actually deliver a modern approach, which is that biopsychosocial approach, really geared towards the acute phase, identifying the opportunities to optimize the way somebody goes through that healing process. So we get tissue quality at a high level. We get the resolution of that inflammation at a high level, but we're also using like a habit-based system to improve the way that they live their life beyond that injury. And again, I believe that, injuries can be an unfortunate opportunity for people to, question their habits and behaviors and start to put in some better ones. And so that's what End of the Ice Age is. It's basically like a system of approach that I've been using for years, that I've just kind of like really finally organized it, put all the research behind it. And then I also provide companion materials, done for you infographics, done for you recipe guides, done for you resources that you can brand as your own and give out to your patients and clients as a way to help them bridge that education gap, or at least reinforce that learning with you when they're home and making those decisions on their own.
Absolutely. Not just, I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad you did. Not just your standard Xeroxed since 1950 protocol sheet to hand out again and again and again. So I love it, man. I love it. You've said a lot of great quotes here. Small hinges swing big doors, and a couple other ones that I've written down that I'm probably going to steal and rebrand as my own with my own branded material.
There's no such thing as stealing, man. It's sharing.
Something that you've said in the past as it relates to opioid overdose usage and just usage in general, and NSAID overuse systematically and systemically throughout the nation and the world, is it's basically putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, right? Like, you're just masking the pain, which is just a signal trying to request a change from your body. And putting a Band-Aid on it isn't going to change why it's there in the first place. So I really like that one.
It's really funny too, because like I just had, like I told you, I just had a 15-year-old come. He's less than a week out of Tommy John, and before. He was in a crummy scenario. He didn't know whether he should go or get the surgery or not. And, I advocated against it because it wasn't like a full thing. But again, that was the decision him and his parents made. And I support them 100%. It's like now we start the work of getting you ready for this process. And so the weeks leading up to his surgical procedure in those treatments was teaching him. And in that moment, when he came back that first week after surgery, because he put these practices in place, looking at his nutrition, tracking his sleep, I taught him basics about lymphatics and how he can manage swelling using touch and just basic stuff that he already had at home. I have a little bit of a loaner program where I'll lend out things like the massage guns and like NMES units, like the Compex, which I really love, so that they have the ability to do more at home in that early stage. And he never had any pain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He had his elbow reconstructed and he's like, Mike, I can't believe I have no pain. I haven't. And his mom was super happy. She's like, he hasn't had to take the pill one time.
Yeah.
And she was shocked. She was like, we filled it because I was worried that he was going to suffer. And I'm like, don't suffer. I'm not saying to suffer. If you're really in a lot of pain and you are doing all these other things right, then go ahead and do your thing. Like,
it has they have their place, but it's not a necessity.
Let me get 3 refills and now I got the itch,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so she was shocked. And so, he's going to go back to his follow-up 2 weeks after to get his stitches out, and he's going to have full range of motion.
That's huge.
Because he didn't swell up ridiculously, because he came out to the clinic a couple days after surgery, and I cut that big splint off him, and he was like freaking out.
Yeah.
Like, the doc said, don't move it for a month. I'm like, doc is trying to protect you.
Right.
You are in a controlled environment with me right now. This brace is to protect you from when you're at Stop and Shop. You know what I mean? Or you're in school with your friends and they're going to jump on your back or something. You know what I mean? Cut it off, taught him these things. He implemented these practices, and all of a sudden he goes back to his doc, and his doc is like, yeah, look how good of a surgeon I am.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like,
no,
I didn't do that much damage.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not looking for that.
No,
I don't care.
You're just being a catalyst to the progression.
Because he's going to get a great outcome. He's going to go back. He's going to be playing better than he ever had. We're going to clean up his underlying issues, and he's going to refer.
And you're going to have his jersey hanging in the rafters someday.
Right. Hopefully, maybe.
Good, man. Good.
Let's see it.
All right. So to wrap this up, I've got 3 questions I want to ask you. I shot you a text prior to this and asked if you wanted a heads up on these, and you said no, surprise me. So we get to see and hear a genuine Mike Stella surprise here. So the 3 questions I'm going to ask every guest: if you could be ranked top 10 in the world at something, what would it be and why?
Wow, that's actually really cool. Top 10 in the world at something. I think right now, just kind of given where I'm at with like the whole like athletic trainer advocacy thing, I think that would mean a lot to me. It'd be like a top athletic trainer. And again, I don't know. It's interesting because I was asked like, hey, if I could go back and like do PT school or chiro school. And again, I love those professions, and would I have had to endure as much hardship in those? Maybe not. I don't know. But I'd rather be a trailblazer as an athletic trainer than just kind of somebody in the middle of the pack. And not to say that any of you guys are in the middle of the pack, but that's a really rare thing. You know what I mean? To be able to say that you're the first or one of the first to do something.
Yeah.
And again, never my intention, but looking back on it now, it's like, man, I wouldn't trade that 10 years of just being in the shit for how I feel about that now.
Right.
And so I hope to actually maybe be in the top 10 or considered, you know what I mean? If I can get into the NATA Hall of Fame for something here's the blueprint for getting in the NATA Hall of Fame. Go to a school, a college program, stay there for 45 to 55 years, never change what you do, never rock the boat, and you're in a Hall of Fame inductee. That's how that happens.
So you want to be
if I could do it,
first inductee to not do any of those things.
To fly the black pirate sails.
There you go.
On my way to
there you go. With middle fingers blazing the whole way.
No middle fingers, just look at me now.
Yeah. Awesome. What's one thing you know that you can do better at or aspire to learn in the next year?
I love learning in general. So I'm always trying to get better at whatever I'm doing. I think the surfing thing's really kind of got my attention right now. So I don't know. I don't know what it is about it. It's a great metaphor for life. It's so many fails to get that one victory.
Yeah.
It's kind of like golf. I know you play golf, right?
Yeah.
Like you take a million terrible shots and then you hit that one like beautiful, perfect, like drop
not a million terrible shots, just
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's more shots that are like, God damn it, than the ones that you're like, the ones that keep you coming back. It's very similar to surfing. It's so condition specific. It's so hard in that way, but also so satisfying. So like that, I think for me on like a personal level is kind of like seeing how much I can still get out of this body,
Yeah.
have however many surgeries later, doing something that I've never done before. And it's really, I think it's made me a more well-rounded person in the last couple of years. So I'm really into that. But yeah, I think just continuing to stay open-minded and being able to take the lessons in life that life is trying to teach me, instead of always kind of like, it's easy for us to all throw up our hands and say, oh, woe is me, and like, oh, my luck and all these things. And I think the hardships I've had earlier in life have kind of showed me that a lot of times it's happening for you. And just being more aware of that is kind of like a day-to-day goal, is just being aware of what I have. It's funny, like people like, even for Thanksgiving, oh, I'm so grateful today. And it's like, and everybody's like, you should be grateful every day. And it's like, gratitude's a hard thing
Yeah.
for people. And I don't think we should be shunning people for not being grateful every day, even if they're able to muster that up one day a year is more than zero.
Right.
But I think that's something I'm still just trying to learn, just how to live my best life and what that means.
Exactly, man. I think something that was instilled in me at a young age through my upbringing was attitude and effort. The only two things in life that you can control. And I mean, everything else follows those two. And
Yep.
you can
Love
change
that.
your world from those two things and
Yep.
potentially those around you. So
Yep.
that's a huge lesson from surfing and golf, even with the bad shots, not millions of them, that we can
But I
learn.
think
So
it's, the whole theme of behind that is just do hard things. Do things that you don't think you're capable of.
right,
So if, to answer that question directly, is in the next year, I want to do more things that I thought I was not capable of.
for sure, for
Like
sure.
even this course, you know what I
Right,
mean? 3, 4 years ago, if you would have told me I was going to author a course and people would actually buy it and like it,
right.
I'd have been like, maybe, I don't
Like
know,
no way. Yeah, right,
again, it's funny, again, even just being around the Rock Tape family, how much confidence that can bring you to be, like even talking to you, like people that I admire in the clinical field, and they're like, Mike, love the way you do this, that, whatever. It's just like, wow, that's like, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe this voice that I've developed is for more than just getting a few likes on Instagram. Maybe people
right.
really want to get a deeper insight as to what that is. And that's the course. And so, I'm really proud of that, man. And again, it was something I did during like COVID, the first lockdown, and I struggled with it a lot, but it was hard and it
That
was worth it.
imposter syndrome is
Right.
a hard bug to shake sometimes, man.
It is,
It's
man.
not
It is.
fun.
Even when people validate you on a daily basis, it's hard.
Yeah, but I
It's
think you're
like,
the same way as me. Like if somebody validates me, I'm like, I look down at my feet. I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm just like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
sure, whatever, if you say so, I
Right,
guess. But
right.
last question here: what is one actionable step that you would advocate for listeners and viewers to take to take better care of their relationships, better care of their health, and better care of their movement?
Wow, man, that's such a great question. I think patience is probably the thing that a lot of people really want but have in short supply. Like all of those things you just say, relationships, movement, being better at anything, it takes time. And a lot of us, again, I think part of like this undertone of, where we're at as a society is we all want the instant gratification. And I get it. Trust me, I'm up on at 1 a.m. on Amazon too. Like I get it. I'm like, God damn it. I have to wait till Monday to get this.
Right.
Saturday night. I want somebody to place the item in my hand, ready to be
Yeah,
used. You know what I
exactly.
mean? Tomorrow.
Right.
Um,
Which they're getting closer
but
to doing. It's scary, but
it is scary. However, I think, going back to that point is that if you really want to see improvement in those things, I think it takes patience. And I think now at 35, I'm finally figuring that out. You know what I mean? I was
yeah.
very impatient, impetuous. I was very angry in my 20s. I had a chip on my shoulder. I felt like the whole world was out to get
Yep.
me. And then until I started to slow down and A, be actually grateful for the things I have. B, put action and effort and attitude into practice. That's kind of like what you said. I'm very similar in that way. I've never been one to take a handout or say that I can't, or um, that you shouldn't do that. And like me just, oh, okay, I won't do that then. I'm just never been that guy.
Yeah.
And so, but I think what it's really taught me is like to be where I'm at now, it took a lot of patience that it was hard for me. You know what I mean? And so, a lot of effort day in, day out that was unrewarded.
Right. But I mean, like, no good thing has ever come from ease. It always takes a
No.
difficulty to reach something that's
Pain, struggle,
right. I
yeah,
mean,
discomfort,
that's what
yeah.
makes you feel best about those earnings is I worked for that. So I love that. All right, man. Well, I appreciate this conversation again. For those viewing and watching, kind of a little wrap up here is challenge the norms. Don't fall into a easy route. And I think what Mike has done well to create his career really is harness that and utilize it to his best ability. We talked about the role of ATCs and not just the community itself, but the healthcare world as a whole, and how changing the idea of what an ATC can do might open big doors for that community. And one thing that I think Mike hit on big time is always learning, always striving for more. And speaking of which, go ahead and sign up for his course. There's a free, I think it's still free mini course downloadable
Yep, free
still.
preview, yeah.
Awesome, yeah. I took that. Not a good friend because I didn't buy the full course because I was busy that weekend. But I am.
I'll send you the link
There you
for the full
go.
course, bro. No problem, no worries.
I was busy, so I've got a good excuse. You just say you're busy, and then nobody asks any more questions in COVID. So, but no, man, I appreciate you joining me here. So thank you.
That was awesome, man. I really appreciate it too. It's always fun to catch up, and I knew we would have a fun time chatting. Let's we
Yeah, I
could
mean,
do it
we
again
went
sometime.
like 20 minutes over, so which
So I
I expected.
apologize.
I
I tend to
expected.
be
So
long-winded sometimes, you know.
we didn't even get to talk about meatloaf, man.
We didn't.
I mean, I feel like what you get, like my name's Reid, your name's Mike, like that kind of
Right.
shapes us of who we are. Now, when you name your dog Meatloaf, like it probably shapes who he is, and he is definitely a meatloaf.
Yeah. His real name is actually Sir Loaf of Meatshire. Is his actual real name. But
Awesome.
Meatloaf for short. Yeah, no, he's living his loafiest of lives right now. He's unfazed by the current political landscape. He's unfazed by the global pandemic. He's unfazed really by anything, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I could trade with him sometimes.
We should take a page out of his book.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Oh,
All right,
man,
brother.
it's
Well, I
awesome.
appreciate you.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. And to all you guys out there listening, thank you. I appreciate it. And I know Reid does too. And keep listening to more of his podcasts. He's a great interviewer.
Perfect. Thank you, man.